I'll repeat again that we always say love is blind, but love is learned. Yeah, love is learned. So, how to love yourself, how to love others in the way that feels good for them, in the way that feels good for you. And at the root of this is really your attachment style. If you do not have an authentic, honest relationship with yourself, you're never going to be able to do that with anyone else in your circle.
Hello and welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickle, and our guest today is Bev Mitelman. I pronounced it right. Yay.
Yeah.
She is a relationship and attachment trauma practitioner, and she's a certified attachment practitioner. So, guess what we're going to talk about today? We're going to talk about attachments. And I'll just really quickly read her bio because it's really interesting. So, as a child, Bev lived in very unpredictable and in a chaotic environment where she never knew if she could rely on her parents to meet her emotional needs. This led her to absorb unhealthy relationship ideas based on what she was witnessing. She believed relationships were supposed to be unbalanced, uncertain, and overall chaotic. I can relate to that.
Mhm.
Prior to becoming a certified attachment practitioner and founding Securely Loved, Bev was an executive leader, a university lecturer, and published author, having obtained her master's degree in 2006. You look too young for that. She has dedicated her entire career, which is 25 plus years. Again, you look too young, working with adults in the realm of personal growth and professional development. So, welcome, Bev.
Thank you so much, and you absolutely made my day. I'm almost 50, so I'll take
Oh,
any compliment. You look too young, you look too young. I mean, it's great. Thank you, and I'm thrilled to be here with you and your audience, so thank you for the opportunity.
absolutely. So, your little bio there, the first paragraph I was reading sounds exactly like mine. And
Mm.
you worded it so clear. I'm like, oh, I can so relate to that. I can so relate to that. So tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about you, a little bit more about you.
Well, so, I think very similar to a lot of practitioners who decide to make this their career choice, it comes from a place of lived experience. So,
Mm-hmm.
I did grow up in a home that was, as you said, very chaotic, unpredictable, day to day. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
what was going to happen, and I grew up. I survived as most children do. I'm not saying I necessarily thrived,
Right.
but there was a set of emotional patterns, challenges that I had, sort of a thought pattern that really wasn't the healthiest. And it's so interesting because, you're so close to your own mind
Mm-hmm.
that you don't even recognize it's unhealthy.
True.
And so you don't, right?
It's like your normal, right? It kind of becomes your normal.
It's your baseline, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because your thoughts, you really only share a fraction of your thoughts, you've kind of got this other idea that, well, everyone else must be having similar thoughts, or this is how everyone thinks. Especially when we're younger, we tend to
Yeah.
think that people around us think the same way.
So true.
And as we get older, we realize that is not true.
Mm-hmm. Very.
And yeah, and so the way that we think, our emotional patterns, all of this is very much influenced by our very early interactions with our caregivers. So those first earliest years, 0 to 5, really, really matter. And they set up a child, once they come into adulthood, to either feel secure in themselves, like trusting of themselves and others, or they develop an insecure attachment, which there's various different types or subcategories. We're going to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
And what we see happening is that these play out in our adult years. Those templates that we
Mm-hmm.
create in our mind while our mind is so fresh and newly forming all of these pathways, they stay with us
Yes, they do.
in the subconscious mind, which means that we're unaware that a lot of times we're unaware that we're behaving a certain way because we're responding. It's almost like a trauma response, right?
Yes.
So the work that I do is to bring this level of awareness to people because Attachment styles, if there's anything that your audience takes away, I want them to understand that attachment styles is learned behavior.
So it can be unlearned as
It
well,
can be
right?
unlearned. Exactly. Yes. It can be unlearned. It can be relearned. And the other important thing is that everyone has an attachment style. So as humans, we all attach to others, right? Form emotional bonds in one of four different ways.
Okay.
And
That was going to
the
be my first question.
yeah, I mean, the boxes are not so categorical. There's, everything's on a spectrum and there's sometimes overlap, but
Sure.
everyone has a predominant style. So this impacts everyone.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I've done a little bit of study on attachment and kind of was horrified by what mine was.
Are you willing to share?
Well, I guess I don't know what the word is, but like I was the clingy one. I was
Anxious, preoccupied.
oh, totally, totally. And I would get so obsessed. I would actually it felt like obsessed.
Yes. Yeah, when you say obsessed, you mean like when you were in a romantic partnership? Okay.
Or
Did
trying
you?
to get into a romantic partnership, you know?
Right.
Yeah,
So you found yourself often feeling the desire to chase for closeness.
correct. Right. And so much of mine was came from I had abandonment issues. I'm assuming,
Mhm.
and that I had to chase them to get them to love me.
Yeah, and so you're so well educated. So thank you for bringing that forward because when we talk about core wounds are the things that again, from our childhood that we're carrying and we're in our subconscious mind and that are impacting us well into our adult years. And the core wound for someone who is anxious, preoccupied is I will be abandoned.
Ooh,
I
bingo.
am alone. I am I am not good enough.
I'm
Um,
unlovable.
I'm unlovable, I'm unlikable. Yeah. And so this really stems predominantly from a child who had a little bit of love, let's say, in an emotional attunement in their earliest years,
Hmm.
but in an unpredictable way and not a consistent way. So they
Yes.
had just enough love to know that it felt really good, but it was not consistent. The love was given and taken away, given and taken away.
Yes.
And so you know that this is something you want, and you actually in your childhood likely chased your caregiver for
Hmm.
their attention, validation, reassurance, and love. And that pattern plays out again
Yes.
as an adult.
Yes. Absolutely. You hit it right on the head. That's exactly it. And
Yeah.
I
And so
can't tell you how humiliating that is.
I know I know it could feel that way. And I don't want to
Yeah.
deny your feelings around that, right? Because these are subconscious patterns.
Right.
So even if you know better, right,
Yes. Yes.
at the conscious level, your subconscious sorry your conscious mind cannot outwill your subconscious. So what's so interesting about the brain and our actions and behaviors and thoughts is that it is controlled primarily, this will surprise you, at about 97% controlled by the subconscious
Ooh,
mind.
I didn't know it was that much.
It's a hell of a
That's a
lot.
lot.
Right. And so the conscious mind is responsible for the other little bit, 3, 4, maybe 5%, but it's a tiny little bit. And so even when you know better, you're still going to fall back into those subconscious patterns
Hmm.
because it's what's familiar to you. And your subconscious mind is trying to keep you safe.
Safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what it feels like when you were saying that? It feels like the subconscious and the conscious collide. And I'm sitting there going, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I am like, I would just feel pulled, literally physically pulled to
Yes.
continue this, even though I'm going, this is crazy. I'm chasing this guy. This is crazy.
Yeah. So you have these moments, right, where your conscious mind kicks in and goes, "This is crazy. I know better. I'm not going to chase this
Doesn't feel
person."
good.
It doesn't feel good, but the way you describe it, you're pulled, you're drawn. It's almost like you're trying to fight against a
Yeah.
very, very deep-seated urge to
Yeah.
chase after that validation and love. Again, your subconscious mind is simply drawing you towards what is familiar. That dynamic is something that you developed in childhood. Your mind understands it, you know it. So it's not your subconscious mind doesn't think, "Oh, wait a minute. This is not the best thing for Lisa." We're
So
gonna
true. It
guide her
just
in another
records.
direction. Yeah.
It just records, right?
It takes you towards, a familiar, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
familiar is safety,
True.
right?
Even
So
though
we
you
are
don't like it.
right. Even though you don't like it. And so really the only thing is to identify these patterns at the subconscious level, and there are tools and tricks, things, exercises that we do to be able to repattern
Oh, good.
these patterns, right, that we have.
Right.
So again, learned behavior can absolutely be
Unlearn.
unlearned and relearned. Yeah.
Hey, thank you for listening so far. If you're enjoying this podcast, be sure to subscribe so you won't ever miss an episode. I like that. So,
Yeah.
so my former attachment style, because unfortunately I don't do that anymore. I can't tell you how freeing that is. But as I'm telling you that, I'm going back to that, and I can remember all the feelings and the emotions that came with it, and how it was just awful. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
So I have anxious attachment,
Mhm.
or had. So what are there's three others, right? Three other main ones, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if we look at it sort of on a broad landscape, there's technically about two big categories. There's
Okay.
secure attachment and there's insecure attachment.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, the estimates around our population say that somewhere in between 40 and 60% have secure attachment. I tend to think it's closer to the 40.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
But the literature does, it does change depending on what you're looking at. And that literature is specific to North America.
Okay.
So let's go on the premise that it's about half, half, 50-50. Okay. It's just easy math. So we have those folks that are securely attached, and we'll talk about what that is in a moment. And then we have folks that are insecurely attached. And within that insecure bucket, we have three subcategories. One is, as you so beautifully described, anxious, preoccupied.
Hmm.
The other, on the other end of the spectrum, with a whole other different set of coping techniques, is the dismissive avoidant.
Hmm.
And somewhere in the middle, the smallest cohort of people, it's like 7 to 10% of our population, has what's called an attachment style called the fearful avoidant.
Oh,
Also called disorganized attachment, also called anxious avoidant attachment.
okay. So tell us the description of those, because I think I know, but I want to make sure.
Yeah, no, that's great. We'll start with secure attachment because that's really what we're aiming towards, right?
Yes, yes, that is our
So
goal. Yes.
that is our goal for sure. So, there's fortunate for them, people who grew up in a beautiful home whereby they did have a level of predictable, consistent emotional attunement from their caregiver, right? And that doesn't mean that the caregiver, let's say the mother, did everything right.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as everything right. But for the most part, the child was able to predict
Hmm.
that, when they needed help, when they cried, when they needed comfort, that would come to them.
Yeah.
And then as they grew up, they started to learn about emotions. They started to learn about emotional regulation, which is a life skill, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
they developed a set of patterns in their mind, healthy patterns that said, I have trust in myself. And I have trust that I can communicate, clearly what I'm feeling. And I also have trust in other people around me
Mm.
that they're going to take what I'm saying and they're going to respond in a healthy way. So that becomes their template, right? That gets patterned into their mind for how to give and receive love. So you can imagine these children, they then go out into the world and they do very well in
Hmm.
relationships. They're communicative, they understand their own needs, they really understand a balance between independence and time with the partner. They understand boundaries very well, and so generally these folks are quite emotionally regulated.
Nice and
Okay.
balanced, right?
Nice and balanced. They're usually very rational, and you will find them in long-term relationships. They thrive in long-term relationships,
Mm.
right? They're so well equipped emotionally to deal with the ups and downs and the challenges,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
There's our yeah, steady eddies.
The steady eddies, and whether you have a partner that's like this or not, you will have people like this in your life, either in your family or friends or work colleagues. Like,
Hmm.
you have people who they've been with a partner for many years and things are going well, and you can tell that they're you just when you meet them, they're almost calm, right?
Right, right, right. You feel a connection with them a lot quicker too. They're
Yeah,
open.
they're open and you feel safe around them.
Correct. Exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Is you feel safe around them. That's it.
Yes, because they themselves feel safe in themselves.
Right, right. So they create that safe space.
Yes,
Got it.
exactly.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
nice.
beautiful. So that's, secure attachment. Now, if we go over to the other side of things, insecure
Our messy
attachment,
area.
it's a little messy, but again, we talk about the starting point and then where we can get to, right?
Right, right.
Because this attachment style impacts so many things, right? Your emotional patterns, your thought patterns, your behavior, your coping mechanisms, your
Yes.
relationship to boundaries, not only with your romantic partner, but the relationship to yourself,
Oh, bingo. Yes.
right? The relationship to family members,
Hmm.
whether it be your parents, your children, your siblings. And so
Yeah.
your attachment style really puts a filter, a lens on how you perceive almost everything in your world.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So that's why I say it's so important to understand this stuff and to, if you are struggling with an insecure attachment style, it just means that you experienced some things in childhood that might not have been the healthiest. Let's work towards changing those patterns into
Yes.
something healthier for you now that you're an adult.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Exactly.
with that said, here's what we're dealing with the insecure attachment. So, we have the anxious avoidant, the anxious preoccupieds.
Which we described earlier.
Which we described. Yeah, so we talked about their core wounds. Emotionally, they often feel sad, they feel lonely, they feel, like they're bad. They're often chasing love, affection, reassurance. They did not learn as a child how to emotionally self-soothe.
No.
And it's an incredibly important skill.
Hmm.
So for emotional regulation as an adult, we need to learn these skills. I wish they taught this in school.
It is so critical. So true.
So true. They don't teach it in school, but okay. So, they didn't learn how to self-soothe. And so that explains in part why they're so reliant on external sources of
Mhm.
validation. They simply have never learned to give it to themselves.
Oh,
Okay.
that's it. That's it right there.
Hmm.
Ooh.
Yeah. Right? It's learned behavior. And so
Hmm.
what we often see, again, because they don't know how to self-soothe, they often feel their emotions in a really big way.
Yes. Yes. Over the top. Hmm.
Over the top, right? So in terms of emotional volatility, like here, that's very common to someone who's anxious, preoccupied. Um, Behaviors such as, again, chasing, running after. We see this particular cohort is quite ripe for things like addictions.
Mm.
Uh, because their feelings so big, oftentimes they're trying to dim that a little bit. They're trying to run from the pain.
Ah.
And so we see some interesting behaviors in this particular group. But again, emotional regulation can be taught.
Mm-hmm.
And this group really does enjoy being around lots of people.
Yeah.
And so you'll actually see that this group of folks will often choose a career whereby they can be around lots of people. Like, for example, it's very common to see teachers, especially in elementary schools, who are anxious,
Uh,
preoccupied.
how interesting.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And when you think about it, their personal needs, right? Their needs is to get that love and attention. And when you walk in as a primary school teacher, you get hugs from all these adorable
Yeah.
kids. That fulfills them.
That definitely probably fulfills that inner child, right?
Who didn't get the consistent love and hugs and attunement that they needed.
Oh,
Yeah. So people think this stuff is random. It's not
it's
random at
not.
all.
I'm learning as I'm studying more and more about trauma. There's so many predictable things that people just don't realize. It's interesting. You're right.
It's so interesting. Now, as luck would have it, these folks who are anxious, preoccupied, very commonly get into romantic relationships with those who are dismissive, avoidant. So if we were, you're already laughing. I know. This always gets a chuckle. Now, if we were to look at it on a
Yep.
spectrum, we have these are both of these styles are insecure attachment, right? But
Right.
very they present very differently. So on one side of the spectrum we have the anxious attachers, on the other side we have the dismissive, the avoidant attachers. Okay, so the avoidant attacher also didn't get the emotional attunement that they needed in childhood. Oftentimes they are emotionally neglected.
Hmm.
Oftentimes these children are left alone a lot as children. And there's almost like a feigned helplessness that they develop. Like they learn really early on that they cannot rely on, let's say, their mother to soothe them, to comfort them,
Mm-hmm.
to be with them when they need that level of support. And so they withdraw within.
Mm-hmm.
Their pattern They create a pattern in their mind where they become hyper independent. They trust themselves a great deal, but they do not trust others. Whereas the anxious preoccupied
Don't trust
does
others.
not trust themselves at all,
Mhm.
but they trust others.
Yeah,
So
yeah, blindly trust others. Mm-hmm.
blindly trust others, but they don't trust themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So now on the flip side, over here with the avoidant, we have someone who does not trust others. They trust themselves. They've developed this idea that, I could only rely on me, myself, and I. And that's how they go through life. And so again, they're hyper independent, right? They're overly self-reliant. They have no modeling for how to, interrelate in a healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
They've got these assumptions in their head that, okay, Lisa, if you and we were going to date, and I'm avoidant, well, I'm going to take care of my emotional needs. And you, Lisa, you're going to take care of your emotional needs.
Which drives us nuts. Which drives us nuts.
Right. Like, that's not my problem, right? Like, it's and because
Yes.
no one ever helped them.
Right. So they don't know how to help others.
No, but it doesn't even come to their mind.
Right.
It's not modeled for them, right? So it's not that they're denying you. They don't, it's not a part of their template for
Right.
how to interact with someone else, right? And so these people are often have a very hard time in romantic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
They do get into romantic relationships. I think that, one of our six basic human needs is love and connection. So we
Mm-hmm.
all feel that to various degrees. They do want love and connection. It's just they have a very hard time with the intimacy piece,
Right.
with being overly close. So and these folks, contrary to those who are anxious preoccupied, those who are anxious preoccupied have a very hard time with boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They don't understand them,
Mm-mm.
they don't apply them, and they don't respect other people's boundaries.
Nope.
Right? So this type of person will just show up at your home. Well, I needed to talk, so I just showed up.
Yes. See, this is where the humiliating part comes in. This is where yeah, because I did do that kind of stuff. And you're standing at the door and and I'm like, why am I doing this? And just that horrible feeling inside. And you're like, you just want to get away. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so but I'm so grateful that you're talking openly about this. I'm going to pause for a minute because I think it's so important for people to understand this. Can you describe a little bit about what that horrible feeling inside is? Like, what is that?
Desperate, 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 desperate. What, and my thought is, what can I do to convince him that I'm the one or that he wants to be with me? Because it just that feeling of being alone and just thinking, I, I got the, because the guy would usually start to like me and then pull away, right? And then it's like, which just made me draw more to him. And
Yeah.
just how can I convince him? How can I convince him? Really, I'm a great person. Really, just that desperate, desperate. How can I convince him? How can I change his mind? And just, you're right, the boundaries aren't even there, and the look on their face as they're standing there going, what are you doing?
Mhm.
And then of course then that just spins you out more, and then you're going, God, look at the look on his face, now he's really going to hate me, he's not, you just spiral down, and then you go home and you got to live with all those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's very real, and I know your audience will connect to that. This
Mm-hmm.
is very, very real. I'm going to change the word
Ah.
from desperation to despair. And the reason I'm saying
Oh,
despair is because
it is
in the
despair.
yeah, in when you're in that heightened state, uh the idea that you're losing someone who
Mm-hmm.
you have deemed to be important to you, it is so threatening to you in the moment
Yep.
that you will do anything to
Yep.
end that level of pain associated to that loss.
Perfectly said. Yes. Absolutely. And that, yeah, because I kept trying, what can I say? What can I do? How can I say it to convince him? And
Right.
while I'm doing this, he's pulling away even more.
Right. And so, okay, so if you're standing in front of an avoidant, because I don't know who you were speaking to in in this scenario that you're describing, but
Yeah.
if you're standing in front of an avoidant, that will absolutely categorically make them run for the hills.
Yeah. And I get it. I get it. Because now I'm not an avoidant now, but I understand. Now I understand why that would be scary. But at the moment, it was that you said anxious, preoccupied. I was
Mhm.
100% preoccupied on how I can get this man to love me. How can
Mhm.
I get him to like me and then love me?
Yeah. And I think if you reflected even broader past that one scenario, you would say that you probably took a similar strategy making new friends.
Yep,
You probably also did a lot of people pleasing within your family. So
totally.
people, yeah, so these are strategies, activation strategies that are used by people who are anxious, preoccupied to try and continuously get that closeness that they desire.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this goes back to trying to regulate their nervous system
Yep.
because their nervous system goes out of kilter when they feel that that need for closeness is not being met.
Yeah, it fed into that abandonment thing that I had. Here's
Uh-huh.
another one. Here's another one. That was going through. No,
Yeah.
not another one. Can't lose another one. Just that constant.
And then we do this crazy thing as humans, we create stories, right? And this one is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because at the end of the day, you're like, I knew I wasn't good enough. I knew, every guy runs away from me or whatever it is that you're telling yourself as a story.
Yes.
Right. But it's because these behaviors for an avoidant are way too difficult for them to manage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They don't manage those emotions for themselves. They've managed to repress their emotions.
Right.
And so when someone else presents like, emotions that are really heightened, they shut down.
Yeah,
So
they do.
so an anxious preoccupied person is trying to regulate their nervous system by getting that closeness and reassurance and connection, safety. The avoidance is also trying to regulate their nervous system by keeping people emotionally at bay, sort of, building a little bit of a
Yeah.
wall, not getting too vulnerable or too intimate with people. They're very, very slow to make commitments in relationships,
Yes. Yes.
because they're afraid that they're going to lose their freedom, their independence, and this means everything to them.
Hmm.
That's how they survived in childhood. So you're not going to take away my survival strategy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and again, I want to repeat,
Hmm.
this is at the subconscious level. So if you have a conversation with someone and they're not aware that this is, and you go, listen, I know you're afraid to lose your independence because you relied on it so heavily to survive your childhood. They'll look at you and go, what are you talking about?
Yes. It's so true. They look at you like,
Yeah.
I have no idea what you're talking about, lady.
Yeah. Actually, what they will do most often is they'll just deflect and they'll go, anyways, do you want a hamburger for dinner?
Yeah, they can't even answer that. They can't even process it, let alone try to answer it.
No, they can't. And it really, they do a very, very good job of repressing their feelings. So
Yeah.
I love working with avoidance, because they've done such a remarkable job oftentimes of repressing their feelings that I now work with them to allow them to feel their feelings.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's beautiful work, right?
Yeah.
Because it's important to feel
Yes.
your feelings. Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
I was just gonna ask you something.
there's one little piece left.
Okay,
Were you
okay.
another question?
Well, I was gonna ask you a question, but go ahead and finish because yeah, yeah,
So there's that last category that we talked about,
that
like
middle one.
the middle one, right? And it is actually in the middle because this cohort of people, the fearful avoidants, they have traits from both the anxious attacher and the avoidant attacher, depending on the scenario that they're in. And for a while, this was called disorganized attachment, which is an apt name. Oftentimes, we see this in children who grew up in homes where there was abuse.
Mm,
So any type of abuse. So what that meant is that they were living in a home with their caregiver who was their only source for survival, love, comfort, all of that, and was also harming the child,
mm,
the same person.
yeah.
And so it creates a
Wow.
disorganized pattern
Yeah.
in the child's mind whereby they flip-flop. They're
Yeah.
called in romantic relationships, the fearful avoidant is called like the hot and the cold partner. They want closeness and they greatly fear intimacy. So it's like, okay, let's hang out tonight, but okay, I need 3 days off. Okay, I'll see you on Saturday, but I don't
Oh.
want to sleep over. It's too intimate. Okay, well, let's go away for the weekend and okay, but then I don't want to see you for 2 weeks.
Oh, I've dated that too. I've
Yeah.
dated that too.
Right. And here's what's so interesting is that so I grew up as a fearful avoidant. I've done a lot of work to move towards secure attachment. But healing is never a destination, it's a journey, right? So I
Right, true.
still sometimes see some of my old patterns coming up.
Mhm.
I can recognize them and I sort
Yes.
of laugh about them with my partner now. Uh, right? But it can be, if you're in a relationship with someone who's fearful avoidant, it can be very, very confusing
Yes.
to be on the end, a partner to that person.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it is quite confusing.
Yes, that one is very confusing. At least with the avoid, they're a little more predictable. You know that they're gonna take off, right? But with that other one, you don't know because one day they're like, "Oh," and then the next day, like, "Whoa," and you're,
Yeah,
"What
and here's
happened?"
the other thing. Yeah, what happened? Like, are you the same person? Do you have
Yeah,
multiple personalities? Like, it can be that extreme.
yeah.
But here's the other thing too. It's just so interesting is that the fearful avoidant can flip flop depending on who they're interacting with. So again,
Okay.
if I'm fearful avoidant, and I'm going to say you and I are dating, and you're anxious preoccupied. I am likely going to respond to you in an avoidant way.
Right. That makes sense.
It does.
Because
But
I
no,
would be too consuming. You would
yeah,
have to do that to get me to back off. Yeah.
exactly. But here's the interesting thing. Same scenario, I'm fearful avoidant. You and I are dating. If you yourself were a dismissive avoidant, I would then become anxious in the relationship. I would become the chaser.
Oh my goodness, that's got to be confusing for you.
Very, very. Yeah. So, and I think working with fearful avoidance is part of my specialty because, again, it is a small subset of the population. Um, Fearful avoidants have core wounds from both the anxious and the avoidant.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it takes some time to really get through all of that. It is confusing, but, I was grateful to find attachment theory years ago because it saved me. It explained why I felt the way that I did, and so that's
Explained
why
your
I think
behaviors too.
it did.
And that's the thing that I'm learning is as I'm learning about the trauma and the behaviors that come out of the different things, it creates that separation between who I am and my behavior. And all of a sudden, not only am I like, okay, I behave that way for a reason, and I don't
Yes.
need to behave that way anymore. And here's how I can change it. And that's why I tell my people, please learn about your trauma, learn about it because it is empowering.
Yes, very much so. In fact, I have never in my life felt calmer. I've never had a
Yeah,
greater level of clarity. Um,
true.
and I think also when you do this type of work, you really there's a level of honesty and authenticity that you need to adopt with yourself
Yes.
and own up to some of the things you did and said that that carry shame,
Yeah,
right? I did lots of things that I didn't like. Now, did I do it to harm other people? No, I was trying to survive.
correct.
And
Right.
so I
Right.
did the best I could with what I had at the time.
Right. Right.
And
And forgive
I think that's
yourself.
true of most people. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had to go through that where I'm forgiving myself for some of my behaviors. Now, I wasn't like a complete crazy woman or whatever, but there was a lot of things that I think about and I'm like, "Oh God,
I know.
can't believe I did." Like
Me too, Lisa. You're not alone. Me
some of those
too.
things I'm sharing on here that I chased my guys, I mean that's but it's like I understand now why I did it.
Hmm.
And I can forgive myself. I can understand. I look at why I got to that point, and I've done the work so that I don't do that anymore, so that I'm not hurting anybody else and I'm not hurting me.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. I share with my clients all the time that emotions typically come through your body in a period of about 90 seconds. 90
It's
seconds.
not, I know it's not that long, right?
No. And so if you have a moment of sadness or loneliness or frustration, just sit with it for a moment. But what most of us do is we take that emotion, which can feel terrible, right? Nobody
Hmm.
wants to feel sad or lonely. We take that emotion and we run with it. We
Yeah.
start telling ourselves stories like, "Well, I'll never meet someone and I'm not good enough." And we carry those stories in our mind for days, weeks, months, and we prolong this period of suffering.
Oh, yeah. We torture ourselves.
We do. And again, all of these stories that we create, they're 9 out of 10 times they're not true.
Yeah.
We believe them to be true.
Yeah. 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 And they feel true. And they feel
Right.
like when I get in that funk, I'll call it a funk,
Mhm.
it's my reality. It feels so real. And it gets so intense sometimes. It's like I joke about it, but I feel like I want to crawl out of my own skin and get away from myself. It just feels so intense. But you're right. Just sit there for a minute. Just sit and the intensity will go away. And it's funny because as you were saying it, it was in my head. Like we create stories. We get these emotions and feelings and thoughts, and then we start building the stories that are going to just confirm everything we're feeling, right? We're going to line up the stories so they fit within our narrative. And it
Yeah.
feels horrible.
It feels horrible, and but it also, if you go even a step further, what it really does is we're going back to our core wounds. So if we really
Oh,
believe that we are unlovable as a core wound, and you go out on 3 dates, and let's say those 3 dates are just not the right person for you, you can see how very quickly, we're going to start telling a story like, well, I knew I was unlovable. Of
Right.
course. I don't even know why I'm bothering. So I'm going to be alone my whole life. And of
Mm-hmm.
course I'm sad. And so this is what we end up doing. But there's
Yeah.
actually no evidence that you'll be alone your entire life. Maybe just date four will be terrific.
I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your questions about this episode, or really anything that has to do with trauma. So you can comment below, or you can reach out to me at asklisatickle@gmail.com. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. Right, right. Your next date might be the one. Who knows? Exactly.
Yeah.
So what can you give our listeners tips, because I know we're running out of time. Can you
Oh,
this is so fascinating. This is absolutely fascinating. I'd love to have you back.
I'm happy to come back. I'm
Yeah,
happy.
because it's just, I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface. I know you're just like going over the beginning of it. But can you give our listeners a tip or two of what they can do today, maybe to help them in these moments?
Yeah,
I mean, you've
absolutely.
already
So
shared some.
yeah, so, awareness, we talked about the fact that these patterns from childhood are in our subconscious mind, which means they're not in your conscious awareness. You're not aware of it. So
Correct.
bringing it to your awareness is really key. So there's a little quiz on my website. It's free. My website is securelylove.com. You can take the quiz, and that would be a starting point. You
Perfect.
answer a set of questions, and it'll tell you where you fall in terms of your attachment style. So, awareness is really the starting point.
That's what I
Um,
always say too. Yeah.
so if you are anxiously preoccupied, right? Well, start learning what that actually means, right?
Right.
Like, how is this impacting your emotional patterns, your thought patterns, your behaviors, right? So maybe there's something that you're doing repetitively that you've tried to stop and you can't seem to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're a shopaholic, or maybe you're a food addict, or maybe you're a compulsive gambler, or maybe you're dabbling in drugs. All of these addictions are things that we do as humans to move away from our source of pain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the pain is actually coming from those core wounds. So instead of running from your pain, honor it, recognize it. Your body's telling you what you need to heal, right? And
True.
so it's so true. So when emotions come up, start to become aware of which emotions are coming up and when. So because that gives you a roadmap for what you need to
You'll
heal.
see the patterns, right? You'll begin to see the patterns.
You absolutely will,
Mm-hmm.
right? And again, emotions in themselves are not good or bad. We tend to ascribe narratives to emotions, like
True.
anger is bad and joy is good. And I believe that emotions have a time and place for everyone.
Yes. Yes.
So if you find yourself getting angry in a situation, please know that that is your body saying, hold on a minute. I don't like what's going on. I'm feeling unsafe. That someone's crossing my boundaries here. So it's not random. Your emotions are not random. They're in response to what you are experiencing and feeling. And so you honor that, right?
Hmm.
But what you are experiencing and feeling and how you perceive the world is greatly influenced by your attachment style.
You described it earlier as, putting on glasses, and I say that too. It's like putting on a filter, putting on
Yes,
glasses with a filter, and that's what you're seeing everything through.
100%.
Hmm.
That's exactly it. So someone who's anxiously preoccupied will almost always think that they did something wrong
Yep.
and someone is angry with them. So, if you and I are having a text chat and you send me a text and I don't respond for 3, 4 hours because
Oh.
maybe I'm seeing clients, you will likely have a thought pattern that says, is Bev angry with me?
Hmm.
What did I do? Did I say something wrong? Oh, maybe she didn't like what we did last week. Maybe she's upset about the conversation. You'll start to ruminate. It has nothing to do with that. I'm just busy.
Right, right, right. God, there was such freedom when I learned that. I'm telling you,
Right.
huge.
Yeah, and so, and that causes a lot of suffering for people.
Oh, ton.
Right?
Oh my
But
gosh.
the lens that you're seeing things through is always you're always looking externally. You're concerned about everyone else around you and what they think of you. And
Hmm.
most often, you're more than willing to, fold yourself into a pretzel to please other people. So we call that self-abandonment.
Mm.
Right? So you start abandoning what's really important to you to please other people because you need to be liked.
Yes. Yes. That is a requirement.
It's a requirement because your core wound is I'm unlikable.
Yep.
But not everyone feels this way. So for example, my core wound as a fearful avoidant is betrayal.
Mm.
So I will be betrayed. And so I have an absolute like zero tolerance for lying. I've got a small circle of friends. I have 6 people in my life who mean the world to me, and then I'm sort of friends with everyone else.
Yeah.
But when people lie to me, that's a no-go. It's a deal breaker. That's my strongest boundary that I have with people. In fact, when
Interesting.
I get into a romantic relationship, I always say, "This is my only deal breaker. If you lie to me, we're done." And I
Mm.
mean it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean it, right? Because betrayal for me really feels harmful.
Yes. Well, if it's a caregiver that is the one that also abuses you, there is betrayal there, right? That's the way a child's going to look at it or understand it. There's betrayal there. Wait, you're
100%.
loving me one minute and then you're hurting me the next.
That's it, but that's exactly it. You're cajoling me to come in and comfort you, and
Mm.
then you're gonna harm me.
Yes.
So
Yep.
it is a betrayal. It absolutely is. And so you can see how that pattern plays out.
Yep.
So, so again, pay attention to your emotions, pay attention to the things that bother you.
Right.
So, because that tells you where your core wounds are. That tells
Mm-hmm.
you what you need to work on. So, if you find yourself ruminating, well, I hope this person liked me and maybe I said the wrong thing or wore the wrong outfit, or that you're really working around this core wound of I am unlikable or I am unlovable,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? For other people, a core wound could be I feel disrespected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would that be an avoidant?
An avoidant can definitely have that core wound for sure. The primary core wound of the avoidant, the dismissive avoidant, not the fearful avoidant, the dismissive avoidant, it's a shame wound, which is going to surprise you. But the primary
Oh.
wound is I am defective. There's something wrong with me. So the child internalizes, as children do, because they critical thought gets developed in the brain much later on, right? Not as a
Mm-hmm.
child.
Yeah.
But they internalize and rationalize that, if I was better or I was this or as that, my caregiver would want to be with me, spend time with
Oh.
me, respond to me. So there must be something wrong with me,
Mm.
right? That I'm being left alone, that
Right.
that I cry and no one helps me, and so part of the reason why they keep people at arm's length is this idea that if I'm vulnerable with you and I let you in and you see the parts of me, the good, the bad, the ugly, you too will reject me like my mother did.
Mm.
Right? And so when you see this and you understand, again, if you if you told an avoidant this, they look at you like you have 3 heads. This is in the subconscious.
Yes. Yes.
So they're very sensitive to criticism, very,
Mm-hmm.
because their core wound is I am defective. So have you ever criticized someone who was avoidant? How did they respond?
Not well at all. Actually, completely pulled away. Like completely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually my ex-husband, and
Mm.
yeah, and he would get pretty upset.
Yeah. Cause you're pushing on that button where
Hard.
he's like, you're hard.
And
You're
I
going
was
after.
vicious. And I was vicious. So at the
Yeah.
time, yeah, I was vicious.
So we see that too, by the way. So I have seen when anxious preoccupieds feel their partner pulling away,
Ooh,
again, it feels like your survival is at threat.
correct.
And
100%.
so it's like it can become, again, the level of emotional volatility can be extremely high. It can become like a raccoon who's trying to claw their way out of a garbage can. They will do anything and everything to try and get the attention of the object of their affection.
Mhm.
And that does oftentimes include things like trying to make the partner jealous,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, being, saying horrible things,
Mhm.
um, criticizing, testing them. Like,
Mhm.
so, generally what happens is an anxiously attached person will start off with the niceties. And if the niceties don't get what they want,
It
they
escalates.
can, they can escalate
Mhm.
into, some really destructive behaviors.
Yeah, yeah. That was the thing, and my ex-husband, I don't bring up our relationship a lot, but we were both messes coming together and having
Right.
to deal with it. And I look back now and I see, like, I would just scream at him. We used to joke, but it wasn't funny, that I could shred him with my tongue. It's just
Mm,
like, it was just so vicious. I don't do that anymore, thank God. But, and that's one thing, I feel bad about, of course, and I've told him I'm sorry numerous times about that. But it's true, because it escalates, and I just feel myself getting more and more wound up, and then it turns
yeah.
into just a screaming match.
Yeah, it's like the emotion is almost like it builds and builds and builds
Yeah.
until the point of eruption.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you something. When you were in those moments where, it escalated to screaming,
Yeah.
did you feel in those moments like you could control yourself?
In my head, I knew it was wrong,
Okay.
and I knew I was out of control, and I knew my son was hearing it, but I did not feel like I could stop. I feel like I had to get this out, kind of
Yeah.
thought.
And so, we talk about trauma responses. The anxiously attached people will often use fawning. There's four. There's flee, fight, fawning,
Freeze, and yeah.
and freeze.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Fawning is the people pleasing.
Yes.
So they'll often start with people pleasing,
Yes.
right? I'll do anything and everything you want, whatever you wanted,
Manipulative.
so be
Mm-hmm.
me, right? When that doesn't work, they will move to fight.
Yep.
Yeah. Whereas, and it's highly predictable, right? We see these patterns over and over. So whereas someone who's avoidant will initially use flight.
Yes. Yes. He would take
Yeah.
off. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
flight. They'll use fight if they have to.
Mm-hmm.
They'll never use fawn. They don't people please.
Mm-mm. No, no. He would the only time he would fight is if I backed him into a corner and he couldn't get out.
That's
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, they'll
Mm-hmm.
fight if they have to,
Right. He
right?
was not I was the fighter,
Right. Yeah.
not him.
And it's funny because people always talk about, communication differences, and they like to draw lines like through, like down the gender line. I find that the predictions for how people will communicate in a relationship is far better defined by your attachment style than
Yes.
gender.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I've seen both the avoidant and the anxious like me in both men and women. I've seen it in
Right,
both.
yes, you will. Because attachment styles, great point, Lisa. Attachment styles are not gendered.
No, not at
They're
all.
not. No. Now, the fearful avoidant as a coping strategy when they're in conflict, they will often freeze. It's so interesting. Like
Wow.
they will freeze, right? So it's almost like they don't know to go left or right.
That makes
Um,
sense. That makes sense. 'Cause there's a lot of confusion right there, right? With that type of attachment style. It's like you said, disorganized, so it's confusing. So what do I do? What do I do? I'm not sure what to
right.
do.
So, and again, someone who's fearful avoidant can be leaning anxious or they can be leading avoidant. And so if they're leading avoidant, they'll flee. If they're leading anxious, they'll fight. So they're unpredictable.
Right.
in that regard.
Which drives us crazy.
Yeah,
Drives us
but
crazy.
for sure. But the truth is that it's no fun to live that way either.
No, it's not.
It's really
No.
not, because you know how we talked about that the standard sort of the emotional pattern of the anxious preoccupied is sad and lonely,
Mm-hmm.
right? The predominant emotional pattern of the fearful avoidant is anger.
Ooh.
Yeah, they're getting through
That
the
makes
day.
sense though. That makes sense though, because which emotion do I deal with, And all these emotions are coming up because you're all over the place, so it's going to be anger because that's the default.
It's the default. It's also like, it's tied back to betrayal,
Yeah,
right? You
yeah.
trusted and it was betrayed. So it's difficult. And again, because they have traits from anxious and avoidant, when we talk about the trust factors, they have limited trust in themselves and limited trust in others. So
Oh.
it's a difficult ball of wax, that one.
Yeah. Yeah, because you got both. You got
You got both.
the worst of both.
Yes. Yeah, you do. And so it's not
Hmm.
an easy way to live. And so people who are fearful avoidance, I feel for you. But again, you can, once you understand this stuff and you
Mm-hmm.
recognize your own patterns,
Yep.
um, life changes.
It does. Because I'll catch myself, that text example you were saying, I send a text and then they don't respond. And and I'd wind up with stories. And now I'm just like, oh, they must be busy. Like that doesn't cross my mind. And if it does start to pop into my mind, I'm like, whoa, time out. No, 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 we're not going down that road. They must be busy. Instead of trying to figure out what I did wrong. What did I do wrong? Reread my message, make sure I wrote it right. That kind of stuff. Ugh.
Right. And like and if this is a pattern and you see that it is causing you some anxiety, like maybe a 2 out of 10. It's not a big, but you can, when you become securely attached, you learn how to communicate your needs. So
Hmm.
you can, let's say this is a text with your partner. You can say, I know you're busy during the day, but sometimes when I check in and you don't respond for 6 hours, it makes me nervous. I
I
just
get
want to make
worried.
good. Yeah, I get worried, but it's from a place of love. It's
Yeah.
not I'm trying to stalk you or I don't trust you. Just write back to me. All is okay. I'm looking forward to seeing you tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. Just so I know
That's
you're
all I
okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so when you become better at saying, just send me back a little text like I'm good, see you soon, instead of being angry.
Yep.
And then let's say seeing your partner later that night and either yelling or giving them the silent treatment. Are
Hmm.
you angry? No, I'm fine. You're upset because they didn't respond to the text, but you don't tell them that. You expect them to read your mind. So I teach people how to just create safety within their relationships, to understand what they need, what their
Yes.
partner needs, and how to be able to communicate that. Because I could promise you that most people, if you say to them, listen, if you don't respond to my text in 3 to 4 hours, I am kind of wondering if you're okay. Like, so, and I've had this talk even with my children. I have two adult children that are away at university, and
Oh
I go,
yeah.
I go, I know you're busy and you're with your friends and whatnot, but if I write to you, hey, are you good? And you don't respond for 6 hours, I think you're not.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going down that road. I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I had to get on my son too.
I try to not go down that road, but it would really help me if you could just send a all is fine, mom.
Right. Right. Yes.
And that's what they do now. Because
Because
I calmly asked them to do it, not
right.
because I yelled at them, not because I, gave them the cold shoulder. Um, you have to communicate this stuff.
Right. And it was how you delivered the message as well.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this has been, we could go another hour, I'm sure. No doubt. No doubt. Excuse me. So I got two real quick questions. The one
Okay.
question I was going to ask earlier is it common for the anxious, preoccupied to be drawn to an avoidant? Is that
Yes.
common?
Yeah. It is. And I'll tell you why. There's some interesting things. So in the beginning, there's characteristics of these two styles that are very, very attractive to each other, which ultimately is usually the reason they break up.
Yep.
But in the beginning, an anxious preoccupied, they're generally very kind, they're very generous, they go to great extremes to be likable,
Yep.
they put a lot of attention on the other person. What do you need? What makes you comfortable? Oh, you don't want to go out tonight? No problem. I'll come to you. I'll cook dinner and I'll bring it to you. And so for an avoidant who has spent a lot of time alone, didn't get the emotional attunement, it feels very good
Oh.
to have that level of attention, right? Now the problem is that once that relationship, the emotional bond starts to deepen, the anxiously attached person, their need for closeness is going to start to heighten, and they're
Oh.
going to start to make likely demands on the avoidant that's going to make them uncomfortable. But in the initial, first couple of weeks, it's
Yeah.
really, really good
For
for the
both,
avoid. Well, for
right?
both. So the other side around, what does the anxious person get? So the anxious person is usually very attracted to the avoidant the avoidant generally is quite charismatic.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually quite rational, intelligent.
Yep.
They kind of they present as though they're emotionally stable, although they are dysregulated, but they're often very stoic. And they're also extremely good with boundaries, which again is something that it's the opposite, right? But
Mm-hmm.
your opposites attract, right? So the anxious person is often in awe of, these boundaries and how this
Yes.
person, how independent they are, and
Yes.
because these are qualities they do not possess in themselves.
Mm-hmm. And I would be attracted to the fact that they could shut their emotions down. Like I would be attracted to that. Mm-hmm.
Yes, because you were struggling with feeling your emotions on such a big level.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so to you, it would be like that would be like a magic pill to just be able.
Yes.
What we know now is that healthy really lives in the middle. You want to feel your emotions and not entirely repress them, but you want to feel them at a place where they don't overtake you.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's manageable. You feel the emotion, you honor it, and then you're able to get back down to your baseline relatively quickly.
Yes.
So it's not driving your behavior towards anything erratic.
Right. 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 Well, that makes sense. That makes complete sense. That it's weird when you start dissecting this stuff. You're like, oh, it makes complete sense.
Doesn't it?
It
Yeah.
just it's laid out. It makes sense. It's so
Yeah,
interesting. So
it is.
one last question. What do you want to leave our listeners with?
I'll repeat again that you know, we always say love is blind, but love is learned.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I like
Love
that.
Yeah, love is learned. So how to love yourself, how to love others in the way that feels good for them, in the way that feels good for you. And at the root of this is really your attachment style, right?
Yeah.
So so Esther Perel often says that, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your relationships.
True.
It's so true, and I would
Hmm.
push that a little bit further to say that the quality of your relationships is determined by your attachment style,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and how well you truly understand yourself,
Yep. That's so true.
right?
Because the friends I have in my life are very different than the friends that I used to have before I did so much healing. And
I'm
nothing
sure.
against any of them. I love them all. Don't, it's not nothing against them. It's just we outgrew each other.
Yes, and that happens. So,
Hmm.
if you do not have an authentic, honest relationship with yourself, right? You're never going to be able to do that with anyone else
No.
in your circle.
No.
And you're
No.
not going to attract that either.
No. No. No.
Right.
Because yeah, exactly. Beautifully said. So if our listeners wanted to reach out to you, how do they reach out to you? So you said your website earlier, but say it again, and we'll have it all in the show notes as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. The website is securelyloved.com. We are also on Instagram at securely_loved. I actually have a team of practitioners that work with me
Oh,
just in attachment. It's not
wow.
just me. So, you can come to our website and read about the different practitioners. We have that free quiz, which is, if you're interested, it'll give you a
Yes.
little insight into your own mind. Or if you have a partner, you could have your partner do it too. It's always fun. And then if you're interested in learning more, you can book a free 20-minute consult with me or any of the practitioners that Securely Loves, and we go from there.
Well, thank you, Bev. This has been fascinating. I think we could seriously go on for hours. It's just so fascinating. And you explain it so well. So thank you for
Thank you.
that. I really appreciate it.